Jakarta is reeling from its most severe monsoon season in recent years. The floods destroying homes and displacing tens of thousands of families in the Indonesian capital.
During the floods, we panicked. Water was gushing in, and it was raining as well. It was hard work trying to save ourselves and our families.
Their problems remain, even when the water recedes.
Major parts of the city, including the area that we are standing on now, is actually sinking by something like 10 to 15 centimeters a year.
This annual disaster is as much man-made as it is because of nature, with poor urban planning and corruption decaying the city.
Sudah banyak investasi triliunan.
A lot of money has been invested in this problem, but the question is, has the problem gone away? What are the benefits of all the programs we have invested in to overcome flooding?
The government of Jakarta has been dealing with the problem of flooding for a long time. We have repaired infrastructure, but we cannot control flooding alone.
I'm Nidhi Dutt. This week on 101 East, we ask, what will it take to stem Indonesia's tide of destruction?
Saya tuh tinggal di sini sejak lahir ya. Saya pun nggak tahu tuh.
I've lived here since I was a child. Back then, I compared to what it is now. I often bathed in it. We would fish here. The water was very clear. In the 1980s, the river started to change. There used to be a green area full of fruit trees on the other side before houses were built there. When I was growing up, the flooding wasn't this bad.
The megacity of Jakarta contains many small flood-prone villages like this one, Kampung Melayu. It sits beside one of the main rivers. 74-year-old Arben is going through the annual routine of counting his losses. His two-story home was submerged just days ago. The water has subsided and he's getting it ready for his family of 9 to return from a nearby shelter. The damage this time is worse than Arben expected, with floodwaters rising to the 2nd level.
Sesungguhnya bangku ini ada, sofa ini ada di bawah, di ruang tamu.
These couches are usually downstairs in the living room. When it started to flood, I moved them up here to keep them dry. But the flood water came up this high, so the couches went underwater anyway. Now there's not much I can do except to leave them here and wait until there is more sun, so I can take them out to dry.
Some of Arben's neighbors are still trying to clear the mud and debris from their homes.
After the flood, there was a lot of mud to clean out. 15 of us host the place, but the water level was still so high we couldn't flush everything away. We need to keep working over the coming days. I'm tired of living in these conditions. Sometimes I just sit there and wonder, what am I doing here? We hope we don't have any more flooding here. We don't want to suffer any more losses.
Kampung Melayu's villages are among more than 100,000 people washed out of their homes in Jakarta in January. More than 40 people died. The city suffered its worst floods in 2007, which affected more than 300,000 people. This year's monsoon season started last month and is expected to last till March. Kampung Melayu residents have organized themselves to pack and distribute public aid and donations, without which the 400 families affected this time would struggle to get back on their feet.
Sabun-sabun mereka kan hanyut hilang.
Many people's household goods like soap and shampoo floated away.
Ini kan untuk saudara-saudara mereka.
This is all done for their own families and friends. Everyone has an emotional bond with each other.
Arben's family is among the last to leave this temporary shelter. It's been a rough stay for his daughter Atika and his 14-month-old grandson.
It started with a cough, and 3 days later, he got a high fever. But when we arrived at the shelter, he was healthy. We haven't moved back home because we don't want his condition to get worse.
But now they have no choice. The shelter, a converted car park at the local hospital, is closing today. The The family heads back to their home on the bank of a swollen river, knowing a period of sustained rainfall will spell trouble again.
I have a plan. I'm going to put cardboard on the floor upstairs, cover it with plywood and carpets, and then put the mattress on top. That way the mattress won't get wet.
There's a pressing need for better plans, especially to disinfect homes when floodwater subsides. The Jakarta Health Agency says some 8,000 victims have fallen ill, among them an increasing number from the nearby village of Cipinang Besar Selatan. As floodwaters recede, the risk of waterborne illness and disease rises. Health officers say a man from this village died from rat contamination of floodwaters, and his neighbors are now concerned that more people are falling seriously ill as well. This 15-year-old boy has been battling a high fever for days. Villagers are panicking. He's taken a turn for the worse.
I'm afraid the boy will die if he does not get help soon. I have seen signs that his condition is worsening. I have told his father to take him to the hospital, but I worry it may be too late for him.
Health Officer Hermansha's medical team is here to educate villagers on how and why they need to disinfect their homes.
There are a few sicknesses we worry about after flooding. Diarrhea is the most common sickness, but people also get dengue fever, leptospirosis, and skin infections. If these are not handled properly, people will die.
Leptospirosis is a disease commonly transmitted by infected rats. Hermansha goes door to door, visiting sick patients and spot testing some, looking for signs of serious infections or outbreaks. He's especially worried about this woman.
Kalau tipes, ya, yang paling utama pencegahannya supaya tidak lanjut penyakitnya, istirahat tidur, bukan istirahat nggak bekerja.
The test turns out negative, much to their relief. For now, health officers are happy with the progress they've made here, but they worry about the times they're not around to help.
Ya, istirahat di rumah ya. Kami berharap warga sini juga bisa
I hope they apply what we have taught them, and that they do not wait for health officers to arrive if there is more flooding. They can do this themselves. Rat control is also really important.
It's much harder to control the weather. Meteorologist Mulyono Prabowo says Indonesia bore the brunt last month of nature's unique conditions. His team observed a cyclone and heavy winds converge from different directions to unleash havoc on Jakarta and areas surrounding the city. How concerned were you watching, as you were saying, for days, this intensity building?
The cyclone condition at that time was very intense, and then it caused the persistent heavy wind over Jakarta especially, and caused the build-up of the cloud over north of Jakarta. Yeah, we watching this for a few days, and then we kind of understand that something would be going on after the build-up.
With fears mounting, the government activated army aircraft to pour tons of salt into the clouds in a bid to disperse the rains. Known as cloud seeding, it's meant to create rainfall before storm clouds build up over Jakarta. But Mulyono says this isn't a guaranteed or sustainable solution.
We cannot control the nature completely. In the case of the maize, the seeding, it can be even stimulate the rain situation come to Jakarta. We really cannot isolate our weather from the climate change and from the global warming situation.
During Indonesia's days as a Dutch colony, Jakarta was designed around a system of canals, similar to Amsterdam. Lives revolved around the 13 rivers that flow through this low-lying city. But over the years, with increasing urban migration and infrastructure build-up, the waterways have struggled to cope.
Kesalahan sistem kanal di Jakarta itu.
The mistake originates during Dutch rule. This canal system is not suited to Jakarta because the city is flat. That is why Jakarta's canal system is susceptible to sedimentation. Secondly, the water cannot flow quickly because sedimentation has changed the function of the canals. Instead of allowing water to pass, it builds up and spills over both sides.
Last month, murky water gushed through Jakarta's commercial and financial hub. Southeast Asia's largest economy paralyzed for days as the government announced a state of emergency. This crucial embankment had burst at the seams. Soldiers rushed to stem the flow. One rock at a time, they fixed the damage. But for how long? Urban planner Yayat Supriyatna says Jakarta is just too overcrowded and polluted. With 10 million people in the city and another 18 million in outlying areas.
Jakarta dalam kondisi seperti itu sangat sensitif terhadap bencana.
Jakarta is very sensitive to disasters. With almost 10 million people living in the city centre alone, it's hard to manage trash. The dense population of areas is affecting the ability of the ground to absorb water. This is causing seawater and rainwater to flood the city.
When water levels threaten the city, Jakarta's Crisis Monitoring Centre kicks into action. It quickly sends out information to various government agencies responsible for rescue and aid. But team leader Risman Kariman says there are limitations.
Here, we keep an eye on 160 CCTV cameras spread out over 5 areas in Jakarta. There are not enough cameras. We actually need about 500. As a result, we cannot monitor all the areas in Jakarta. On top of that, most of our staff here only have high school education, so the IT knowledge is inadequate.
Jakarta's northern coastal area of Pluit needs more than crisis monitoring. It's desperate for solutions.
We are actually below sea level. Over the last couple of decades, though, floods incidences have appeared to get somewhat worse and more severe.
After decades of haphazard urban planning, Jakarta doesn't have time on its side. I meet Phuc Chuan Eng, a water and sanitation specialist for the World Bank. Excavators are here digging out flood debris. Phuc says Jakarta urgently needs to dredge its waterways and repair infrastructure.
Significant parts of Jakarta, particularly the northern half nearer to the coast, have been sinking over the last 2-3 decades. Major parts of the city, including the area that we are standing on now, is actually sinking by something like 10 to 15 centimeters a year.
The World Bank has invested $200 million to help fix the water flow and management problems here. As part of a 5-year plan, it wants to bolster resistance along Jakarta's coastline and key waterways. But executing big plans in one of Asia's most densely populated cities is no small feat.
People have moved closer and closer into public lands. They are actually residing now within the flood infrastructure of Jakarta, which really means that they are the first to be flooded. So there are 2 dimensions to this. One is how do you manage and address the issue of people living so close in terms of the infrastructure works that's required, but the other is how do you reduce the vulnerability of people who are actually living very close or within the flood infrastructure.
The government's answer is to move residents away from vulnerable waterways, turn vacated areas into green belts, and build a new underground canal system. Overseeing it all is Jakarta's hugely popular governor, Joko Widodo, better known to the people by his nickname, Jokowi. Often seen in the thick of relief efforts, he wants to relocate all families out of illegal settlements and into purpose-built flats like these. Those living here pay a subsidized rent of between $15 and $20 a month. Last year, Widodo was voted into power largely because of anger over the city's struggle to contain flooding. But his newly formed disaster mitigation agency says relocation is a challenge.
Coordination is not easy. We are talking to people who say they are happy to unite with each other and deal with this flooding. First, they agreed to be relocated, but now the problem is they're asking for compensation. But we're offering 2 years rent-free. It's easy to build up and widen a river, but relocating people is not.
That applies to flood-prone villages like Kampung Melayu. Rustianto isn't sure what life will be like if he moves further from the city.
In this situation, when it floods, we develop strong relationships with each other. We share our food and our water. We are like family. In any situation, our neighbors are the first to help us.
His neighbor Aben would rather remain in this central location and deal with the consequences of bad weather.
We have easy access to transport, schools, a hospital and clinics nearby. It costs only 20 cents to get there. If we move further away and any of the children get sick at night, it'll be difficult for us.
The government promises to improve transportation and amenities near relocation estates.
We have to be wise when dealing with this. We don't want people to see relocation as a burden. The government of Jakarta has been dealing with the problem of flooding for a long time. We have repaired infrastructure, but we cannot control flooding alone.
Urban planner Yayat Supriyatna agrees the central government needs to help fix waterways in neighboring regions.
Jakarta tidak bisa bekerja sendiri.
Jakarta cannot work alone to cope with the floods. It has to work with the surrounding areas, especially upstream, because the rivers in Jakarta are integrated with surrounding waterways.
How does flooding affect the transport system in Jakarta?
Banjir telah membuat sebagian Jakarta menjadi lumpuh.
Flooding paralyzes some parts of Jakarta. There are big puddles everywhere on the main roads. Train services are also affected, so flooding in Jakarta automatically has an impact on the economy, transportation and social activities. You can say flooding causes big losses.
So far this year, losses have amounted to $2 billion, according to government estimates. And there's good reason why business leaders want this to end. The country has just attracted a record amount of foreign direct investment, and a sizable amount of the $6 billion it earned last quarter is being spent in the capital. Indonesia's investment chief, Khatib Basri, says when it comes to putting an end to flooding, tackling corruption is a good place to start.
If you can get rid of corruption, then maybe you can allocate more money to build the infrastructure. The one who probably doing this infrastructure project in the past, they were politically connected. So the government cannot revoke the project anyway from them, without processing to the court, because we are in the transition to democracy.
Governments have spent a lot of money to overcome this flood problem, but we haven't seen results. The people of Jakarta, under the new government led by Jokowi, have more confidence the city will be able to deal with these floods. For example, he was here to oversee the repair of this embankment. The office in charge said this work would have taken a month in the past, but under Jokowi it took only 5 days.
To avoid flooding in Jakarta, we need discipline from all the people and all parties. Without that, we cannot cope.
Khatib Basri warns it's not just corruption at the government level. Businesses are also guilty of it on a day-to-day basis.
There is something worse than organized corruption, which is unorganized corruption. And this related to the issue of the monsoon, for example. This corruption sometimes, I hate to say this, work like efficient grease. You know, they bribe the people on the field not to open the waterfront, for example, in order to avoid their area, their location, you know, get affected by flood. They could avoid the impact of the flood to their company because they are the one who able to bribe. But what about the small companies? What about the common people who doesn't have money, who is not, you know, who cannot afford to bribe?
For common people like Hadum and his wife, the monsoon season is a time of financial gloom. They've been selling vegetables in Jakarta since 1965. Every day they travel east of the city by road to pick up supplies. During this monsoon season, flooded roads have slowed down their journey. Suppliers often run out of stock before they arrive, or their perishable goods go bad.
We can't sell rotten produce. We have to throw it away. Chilies usually cost $1.50 a kilo. They have gone up to $2. The cost of tomatoes has risen from 70 cents to $1. When it floods, prices go up and we suffer the losses as we don't make our usual sales.
Back in Kampung Melayu, Arben and his family are looking forward to the day things get easier and they can cook a meal at home again. Their kitchen is still wet and their stove is drying out upstairs. The monsoon season adds extra cost to the tightest of budgets.
If we buy a whole chicken and prepare it ourselves, it costs $3 and we can eat it for lunch and dinner. But when we buy chicken and rice from the store, it's about $1.50 per portion. We have a big family.
This area is actually our living room, where I would put my couches and TV. But the floor upstairs is still wet, and the air feels damp and cold, so we are sleeping here, or we might fall sick. It's safe here. We've disinfected it and sprayed mosquito repellent, so it's germ-free.
It will be safe in March. We're worried there will be more floods until then. I will not evacuate to the shelter again if the water only reaches this level. But I'm afraid the water will reach the ceiling again. I'm scared I will get trapped by the floodwaters and I won't be able to get out.
Arben has lived through this so many times, he can even joke about it.
We'll have to swim to find food and use floats. I'll get instant noodles, coffee and other food for a group of us, and then I swim home. But the bad thing is, if I forget one item, I'll have to swim out again.
As families across Jakarta wait for the worst of this year's rainy season to pass, the city's leaders are racing against the clock. They need to find lasting solutions to the mounting monsoon problems, not only to protect homes and livelihoods, but also to keep the capital of Southeast Asia's largest economy attractive to investors. The scale of their respective challenges is vastly different, but their hopes are the same.
I hope my children have a better life and they don't experience what I have. I hope they move to a better place, away from the floods. I want them to be fortunate enough to not have to experience what we are going through.